Right along, and we're going to move into our irrigation technology product people. And we have some really top individuals here, and we're very happy that you can take time out of your schedule. And I know the first one I want to introduce is Don, and Don asked me, what do you really want? And I said, the wise use of water. And so Don, that's a big area on here, and it's all yours. And we give all three of you people a couple of minutes longer than normally we have. But yeah, Don, it's all yours. This is Don Franklin from Hunter. I should have finished my introduction.
I have handouts. This will dovetail really nicely in with what you were talking about, Mike. How to calculate your irrigation schedule based on soil holding capacity and ET. So I'm going to pass these out. Please take them, and you can. That's your homework assignment. And I have plenty more out in the car. This is they gave me about 10, 15 minutes to kind of go through and 15 minutes. Yeah, 5 minutes for.
I'll bet you have 5 minutes for questions. I'll bet you got 20 minutes.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And the other two presenters have it all.
Anyway, a lot of information in a really, really short amount of time. Most of you don't know who I am. Those of you that know who I am know that I'm sort of kind of the industry idiot. Every industry needs an idiot, and that would be me. I have been around in this industry, kicking around for about 45 years. I sit on the IA certification board. For those of you that are certified irrigation auditors, yes, I go through and review all of your stuff about twice a year. I'm a certified irrigation designer and teach the class for the IA, as well as a certified irrigation auditor. I've been with Hunter for about 7 years. Kind of a nice way to close down my career. No, Mike, I'm not planning on leaving soon. Hunter is a great place to work at. It's a California-based company. I just have a blast. They actually pay me to sit here and talk about something that I'm very passionate about. Thank you. Anybody not have one? I also have a PDF version of this. You can pull it down from our website. We'll be talking a little bit about the website today as well. But I have a PDF version, so if you would like an electronic version of that, just come up and see me. We'll mark on the little deal that you want that. As well as this PowerPoint presentation, you're more than welcome to have that. There are some hidden slides in here, things that Michael was alluding to about distribution uniformities, technical type of stuff. But you're welcome to have all of that in a PDF format if you just let me know. So, I live up around Colfax area. I don't think I've ever seen anything like this on the marquees from Caltrans. And it's all over down there in the Sacramento area. We have an issue with why we go through droughts from time to time, but what is the biggest influence that will cause a drought?
Population.
I was expecting somebody to come up with weather. I can tell you, this is a really smart group. It is population. I understand this is one of the worst droughts that we've had since 1970 something. The difference is, I'm sorry?
76.
76. The difference between then and now is several more million people living in California. Drove by Lake Folsom. This is the dam right here. And unfortunately, they're allowing people to drive down in here. I don't mind them walking, but driving I think is really kind of stupid because there are a lot of fish eggs that are down in there, and it just I don't get that. But what's that? Oh. So at Hunter, we have a product that we call the NP Rotator. How many of you have heard of the NP Rotator? A few of you? It's a little nozzle Michael was alluding to it earlier, it was up on his chart. And we have about 6 patents that have been in this product, and then we purchased the full-blown product from Walla Walla right around 2006, 2007. And so for 2 years, since we've had this product, the engineers got together and versus spray nozzles, how much water have we actually saved? They calculated out 15 billion gallons. Question, how much is 15 billion gallons?
Not much.
Not much. Okay?
Gallons versus acre feet.
I don't know, how do you get your arms around this? How do you get your head around it? You know, we tried at Hunter Industries to say, well, it's X amount of football fields or tanker cars. I don't get that. I don't understand that. So what I did is that I started looking at various populations throughout California. And I went on the USGB's website or somewhere to find out how much water people will consume a day per capita. And it is anywhere, and you guys can correct me, since I'm talking to the experts now, but I thought it was anywhere between 80 to 100 gallons a day. Is that close?
Or 210.
210.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, according to the U.S., the average across the United States was anywhere between 80 to 100 gallons. So I just did like 90 gallons per person. And then started looking at various populations. And this helps me to understand, you know, how much 15 billion gallons of water is. So for Los Angeles, and this slide is probably a couple of years old, so I'm sure the population has grown. But basically, that would give LA about a little over a month of water. Just by changing out a little nozzle. It's like unscrewing a jar cap. It's that simple. And it fits, as Mike had pointed out, it fits on all major manufacturers' irrigation. They're on their products. I think that's pretty cool. They talk about that when you start lowering your application rate to where the soil can actually start taking it in there is a how many of you are familiar with the Assembly Bill 1881? The Model Water Ordinance. Many of you are not in here. The state of California, a couple of years ago, passed a Model Water Ordinance bill. It was under Schwarzenegger that says we're going to save 20% of water by the year 2020. And this landscape ordinance was designed to do this. Well, one of the things that they are pointing out in this ordinance is that the irrigation, the application rate that Michael was talking about earlier, needs to try to match as close as possible the infiltration rates of the soil. And people have said that, well, when you lower your application rate, then you're going to increase your watering window. We'll talk about that in a minute here. Because that's actually an industry myth that the IA has helped to perpetuate, but we'll talk about that. But it's actually, we had Ewing come out and do an audit in San Francisco at the Presidio. And they did an audit, and this is what they found, that this was their precip rate, this was how many gallons were going through the system, and this was the system distribution uniformity, was at 31%. And that's their pressure. And then what they did is that they unscrewed the nozzle. They didn't straighten up any heads. They just unscrewed the nozzle, put the NP rotator in, adjusted it, dumped or put the catch cans back in their little stands where they were, and re-audited that same zone. And now they came up with, they dropped the precipitation rate, they cut that in half. They cut in half the flow rate. They've increased the distribution uniformity just by changing out a nozzle. It's that simple. This was actually, how long has drip been in our industry?
40 years,
How many?
longer than 40. It's really been good since the 30s.
Yeah, they've been doing it for a long time, but like 40 years, is that what you?
30s.
Yeah, for a long time. When MP Rotator hit the market and the water purveyors all over the United States were seeing how effective this actually is, they started giving rebates. First time in the history of our industry, water purveyors were turning around and actually paying people to put this in, because they would go from this efficiency, if you will, distribution uniformity to 77. That's a savings of 46%. The other really cool thing is when you look at the CFFs that were applied, before 205 and down to 83, that's a 60% less. That's huge. The really cool part on this too is that it actually shrunk the bloody water window. We're putting water down in less amount of time. Why is that? Looking at this chart. Because what they're saying, what our industry says, hey, if you put down 1.6 inches, the more water, the faster you put it down, the shorter your watering window. That's what the industry is saying, including the water auditing program. That's only half the equation. But how is it that we are able to actually cut this time down? Efficiency and the distribution uniformity right there. Because we increase the distribution uniformity, we're actually able to shrink our watering window. When we're able to shrink the watering window, we're able to use less water. How many people are using booster pumps? Any booster pumps? No? One? Okay. The savings that you see in water is directly related to electricity. So it does then turn around and save. It saves PID as well. Cool little piece of technology. So and you're welcome to have this calculator as well. This is a calculator that I created, to where if you had just gone out and purchased 50 heads, figuring this was the billing unit and the cost, what's the cost per unit on PID? Just out of curiosity.
For water, 75 cents a 100 cubic feet.
Okay, 75 cents for 100 cubic feet. So you can come down here and extrapolate that down. That's not going to be quite half. But yeah, at 50 heads, you run the calculation. I don't know approximately how much are the heads going at Ewing?
About $5.
About $5. Okay, so you can do the math right there. So 5 times that's going to be your outlay cost. And when you look at that and you're looking at typical 12-foot, you can go down here and you can see the bottom line is kind of your net savings from this irrigation period from March to November. So it's kind of a return on the investment on the calculator. Does that look like something that might be of interest to some of you? Yeah, you're more than welcome to have it. Because my goal here is to just kind of pique your interest and give you, there's an old term, give a man a fish, you feed him for a day or something like that. Teach you how to fish and you'll eat for a lifetime. That's my goal here. I want you have a toolbox that you use for water conservation. What is the best tool in your toolbox? The tool that gives you the best return. What is it in your toolbox? You are smart people. Some people tell me, well, it's going to be drip. Some people tell me it's the plant palette. And those are all great tools in your toolbox. But this gentleman back here just pointed to his head. It's knowledge. That is your biggest tool in your toolbox. If you know how all of this stuff interreacts, then you can go a long, long way, not only just in conserving water, but in conserving energy. So, dispelling the industry myth, and going back to what Michael was talking about, he was showing you some holding capacities. This is infiltration rates. So we're trying to match our irrigation to our infiltration rates. So you can see that that's pretty close to being for most of the soils in and around this area. Yeah? Pretty much?
Pretty much.
Okay, cool. And of course, notice too, that when you start adding slopes, I mean, your neighborhood is like my neighborhood. The only flat place is the pad at my house. Everything else is all sloped. But that infiltration rate really starts to go down. So you look at sprays, they're going to have a high precipitation rate. Rotors are going to have less. Drip can be all over the place. Drip can be all over the place. It can actually be inline drip when you're trying to irrigate underground. Put that underground. You put inline drip in there. You have a precipitation rate of about 1.5 inches per hour on that. And then you have empty rotators here and right here. So these two items, just like what Michael has said, these two items basically are matching as close as possible the infiltration rate of the soil. The myth. When you look at your entire landscape system, starting from the city water meter, the water goes through the water. The goal is to get the water to the root zone, right? That's the goal. So it goes through the water meter, goes through the backflow, goes through the irrigation main line, goes through the irrigation valve, goes through the lateral lines, up through the sprinkler, spat out into the atmosphere, comes down, hits the ground, going through the soil, and finally finds that root, those root fibers. In that entire system, what's the most constrictive component in that entire system? Soil. It's the soil. If my intake rate is only, anywhere between 0.5 to 1.2 inches per hour, what in the world am I trying to cram over almost 2 inches of water down through that? It's the infiltration rate is what dictates the water movement, not how fast the water is moving through, not how fast you put it out. So, you have things like cyclone soak. If you're going to fill up that reservoir, that's what I call a gas tank in there, it takes the same amount of water all the time. It's how fast can you get that water into that gas tank. That's what dictates your water. So much for the myth. We have some smart weather sensors that are available as well. And this guy up here is called SolarSync. All of our controllers actually are EPA WaterSense approved. All of them. Which is really cool. The technology is getting to be really, really tiny. Back when I got into this business and we were starting to do ET stuff, you'd have a Campbell Scientific weather station that would cost you 10 grand. There's a long time on the return on the investment for that. As Michael was pointing out earlier, and Ewing can tell you, you can get into a smart controller system for what's
$200.
couple $100. The return on the investment is going to be very, very quick. Usually if it's within 5 years, somebody will pull the trigger. Does that make sense? So all our controllers are EPA WaterSense approved, as we've stated there. The other tool that I want to share with you, and Michael had given you a great website to go to be able to calculate, some audit information. Hunter's website has calculators on it. Very user-friendly calculators that don't cost you anything. And you can go on there and you can print all of this stuff out for your customers. You can put in soil type, plant type, slope, exposure, precipitation rates, all of that stuff, and generate a really cool report that you can give to your friends or others, people that you're trying to educate, and get them to get them to understand the wise use of putting water down. Does that make sense? So we have different ways of going through these various calculators. We'll just kind of blast through all of these. So in closing, just 3 things: how you apply the water, the control system that you use, and then how you calculate that, the knowledge. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, John. Our next presenter is Mike Everfeld from Redbird. Mike?
Yeah, we're going to have Dominic DeRoss as well to join us. Good job, Don. I will disagree with Don just right off the bat, though. He's not the idiot of the industry. So that's not the truth. So you don't need to listen to that foolishness. I'm going to pass it over to Dominic to get started, and I'll pick up where he's left off. But my name is Mike Pimentel. I've been with Rainbird for 7 years. I started out as a contractor account manager, so working on projects. I was in the green industry before, the large commercial maintenance company. And then for the past 2.5 years, I've been specializing in low volume irrigation, drip irrigation. So Dominic's the current contractor account manager for Northern California and this area, so I'll let him go ahead and get started. You got that thing?
Something weird's happening.
You're really alert.
Oh, there we go.
There we go.
All right, thanks for having us today, you guys. We appreciate coming up here and you having a captive audience to talk about our products. I'm going to go through pretty much our controllers here at the beginning, and then Mike is going to finish off with the rest. So I'm going to not get into the same amount of depth that Don just did about our products. I'm going to give you a quick overview of some of the products on our controller line and sensors that will help save you water. First one I'm going to talk about is our ESP SNT smart controller. This controller actually has like a little mini weather station at your site. It's between 4 and 22 stations, and it actually calculates the amount of rain, solar radiation, and humidity at any given site. It also has historical data for any given zip code that you enter in when you program the controller. So basically you're not going to program this controller like you normally do, where you go in and type in the amount of minutes on any given valve. You're actually going to let the controller figure out how much water it truly needs to be put down. Just like Michael was talking about ET-based controlling. A lot of controllers don't really take the actual weather data from the given site, like this one, so that's why it's unique. It can be put on a house or, again, light commercial. A wireless rain sensor. This is basically just a shut-off. When it rains, it'll not allow your controller to water. So this is a basic water-saving technology. Pretty much can be put on any controller that you have. You can mount the sensor up to 700 feet away from your controller, out of sight, hide it, in a good location. Soil moisture sensor is this guy right here. Basically, it operates in the same way in that it just shuts off your controller, doesn't allow it to water like the the rain sensor, but this one is actually measuring the amount of moisture in the soil. You attach the little sensor to a valve, and it runs through the common to the clock, and you set your soil moisture levels that you want it to turn off or not water at, and it's just basically a kill switch. So this is an inexpensive way to save water, because you basically would put the sensor in a mid-range location on your site, not the driest location, not the wettest location, but kind of an average representation of any given site. You bury the sensor, and we're claiming up to 40% water savings. This is our commercial controller. I'm not going to talk too much about this, but I can spend a lot more time doing so. We have the LXME, which goes between 4 and 48 stations, and then our decoder version, the LXD, can go up to 200 stations. Now, both of these controllers are actually modular. So the top module back there in the upper right, that's our ET cartridge. So the same ET-based control, you can convert this basic controller, 10-based controller, to ET-based with the use of that cartridge. It snaps in, as you can see, right here, and then you have a little antenna up there which receives hourly weather data. And unfortunately right now I believe our Chico service is down on this clock, so I don't want to promote this too much right now because we have to get that squared away. But in Sacramento, for example, this controller can get hourly weather feeds and with information, and then it's basically adjusting the clock and transforming that controller to an ET-based controller. The other cartridge that we had up there was called a IQ cartridge. It's basically a cartridge that allows you to control that controller from your computer. You also, that's a high level, that converts that basic controller to a high level controller, like more similar central control features. I'm going to pass it over to Mike.
I'm up already?
You're up already, man.
All right.
You like to talk. I got to give you some time here.
All right. So, it seems like a lot of the things today have been about soil type, infiltration rates, different product options, and Hunter, Toro, Rainbird, they've all got some great products, okay? Rainbird has been around a long time. I think it's a trusted name in the industry, just like Hunter and Toro, okay? But we have a lot of different options, and I think one thing that's common in our industry is every one of us manufacturers have something that might work for your situation. Every site's going to be a little bit different. And so it's kind of nice to have competitors and not just one company up here saying this is what we have to use, right? Because every single time we want you to be able to choose the best option for your landscape. And while we want to save water, one big thing that Rainbird's about is healthy landscapes. So, there's definitely water-saving options, but healthy landscapes are a big driver. And for Rainbird, it's all about the intelligent use of water. So we have all these different categories of different things. We talked about controls just now. I'll get into some of the other things more specific. The next is the HEVAN. Everybody used a variable arc nozzle in their life, right? Everybody's a landscape contractor, just show of hands real quick. 3 of you, all right, good. I know that there's more than that in the room. Well, this variable arc nozzle is a little bit different than the one that we've been selling for the past 20 years. We talked about high precip, as that may not be a desirable outcome, and I understand that, and I do agree with it. But with this, in testing, it actually measured highly efficient, and that's what the HEVAN HE stands for. So it's got some numbers that Center for Irrigation Technology is throwing out there about how efficient it is, somewhere above 70%, right? But what it is 30 12-degree orifices, and each one is a cannon, so it has good soft-in watering, even distribution, and large water droplets. It has a matched precip with the NPR nozzle and the U-series nozzle, but it's just really good for a landscape contractor to have, just because we carry it in 8, 10, 12, and 15, and it's 4 SKUs for 0 to 360 degrees at above 70% efficiency. So, You're absolutely right. The graph that Michael had up earlier with the infiltration rate, and then it had ranger like way at the top. You know, in our world, we don't really view that as a bad thing. We just need to control around that and program around that. So we aren't running more than 2-3 minutes at a time to minimize runoff and other issues that we might run into. We also improved this product with a harder plastic on top. You guys have probably seen these broken in the field. That's been a big problem with these, and then they slide out of position. So there's new plastic on the top, and just so I get all the marketing terms correct, it indexes at different points with exact edge technology. So it's very, very cool. And they're affordable. They're affordable, you know, so that's always something people like to hear. But yeah, in 2011, the IA show was the best product in the turf and landscape segment. So it was a pretty big deal for us. Next product is something somewhat similar to empty rotator, not the same product. We had rotary nozzles. We call ours rotary nozzles, a stream spray. But previous, we only had them in quarter, third, half, 3/4, 2/3, and a full. And it was really limiting because, you know, you're on a project and it's got swooping bed lines, and, you know, it was tough for us to sell, quite frankly, because we just had these pre-arced units. So basically what this did was it gave us a multi-arc adjustment. So it goes from 45 degrees up to 270. And so it kind of gives you a lot of play. But we still offer the pre-arced ones, and specifically for you guys and gals, the half circle and the full circle. You could still purchase those at a much reduced cost, and then use these for the rest of the options. Because when you're replacing these things, you guys know if you're in the industry, I mean, 60% seem to be halves, right? So you can purchase those at a lower cost. But it still always has the Ranger quality. And this is actually really cool too. It's just use your hands. So there's no tools or anything. You can adjust your radius just by pushing down, or excuse me, your arc. You can adjust your arc by pushing down on the unit, and you can adjust your distance by twisting the side by making your radius longer or shorter. So it's kind of cool to be able to do that all with your hand. How the R-band is different. You know, and if you try to mix it with an MP, probably wouldn't be good recommendation. Like, I think you should go with one product or the other, you know, because this has a much higher precip rate. So if you're going to do the audit that we talked about earlier, you know, your thing's going to be all screwed up because you're going to have some that are coming down at 0.4 inches and some that are coming down at 0.6, and then your averages are all messed up. And it's the same with a standard spray nozzle. So if you're using like a Toro spray head and a Hunter spray head and a Ranger spray head, your distribution uniformity is all screwed up. So if you go to a new site, you know, stick with the brand that's there, or make a conversion for all of that zone. Otherwise, you're just complicating the mess, okay? I only have this one nozzle in my truck, you know? That's why there's 16 different brands on this site, because of the previous 16 guys. So one thing that's really cool, the Ranger invented a while ago, you know, the 5000 rotor, for those of you who use rotors. One thing that's cool about this is it has a pressure-regulated stem. And pressure-regulated stem for the rotor regulates to 45 psi, whereas a 1800 or a spray head, even Hunter has them too, regulate down to 30 psi. Okay? And optimum pressure was a big thing that Michael was talking about. If we have the wrong pressure, we're going to have a really bad outcome. And I'm going to talk some numbers with you guys that are really easy to take to your customer to help them upgrade their system and reduce their water waste. But this is the only rotor in the market that's pressure regulated. And earlier you said 60 to 120 in this market. So these are supposed to be run at 45 psi. Spray heads from any manufacturer, Toro, Hunter, Raver, all of our catalogs are at 30 psi as a manufacturer's recommended pressure. So if they have spray heads that are not pressure regulated on your site, that is a proposal right now. Okay? And I'm going to give you a number here in a minute on how to figure that out, on how much water you're going to help save them. So here's like where the pressure regulated stem is located. It's just a spring inside of the stem that basically regulates the pressure down. So it can have you know, up to 100 PSI underneath it, and actually have the actual pressure that you want coming out of it. That's a cool arrow.
That was nice, that was nice, huh?
Yeah, I did that. Right there. Anything else cool in this one? I don't know. All right, that was cool. Wow, a lot of information. So again, 30 PSI per spray head, right? So this, if you guys take anything away from me personally today, it's, we got a pointer here. There he is. PRS ensures optimal nozzle performance, both in sprays and rotors, okay? In a high-pressure system, reduces water usage by 6 to 8% every 5 PSI beyond the manufacturer's recommendation. So basically, it's 7% every 5 PSI beyond where you're supposed to be. So let's say you're operating at 60 PSI. That would be 6 increments of 5 PSI, right? 30 PSI above where you're supposed to be. 6 times 7% is 42% of your water. Every second. So every 5 PSI beyond the manufacturer's recommendation, you will be losing 7% of your water. And that's not just Ranger. Am I right?
That's correct.
Okay. Been validated by the veteran.
Don't give me the credit, it's Bernoulli. It's back with Bernoulli's equation. And that's, you're right, you get the huge savings when you regulate.
Yeah, there's some sort of cutoff at some point, right? Like probably around 70 or 80 PSI, the equation kind of falls apart. But if you're operating at, let's say, 70 PSI for a spray head, you're supposed to be at 30, right? So there's 40 PSI in between. So 8 increments of 5 PSI. So 8 times 7%, it's 56% of your water. At 70 PSI, you are losing every second. So it doesn't matter what the controller is. You can upgrade to a stream nozzle, be it an empty rotator or rotary nozzle or something like that. And that'll be able to work better at 40 to 45 PSI. But even then, you still have that same equation once you start operating at these higher pressures. So there's always this trick question, what's it better to regulate pressure at the head or at the valve?
Right,
What's that?
I did right.
Right. Were you the one pointing at your head earlier? So yeah, the answer is both, right? So if you had to make a choice, some people believe at each individual head, and I'm one of those people. Some people believe at the valve, you know, it's a toss-up. But either way, as long as you're managing pressure, you're going to be doing better. And pressure is something that Rainbird is like putting a lot of effort to help everybody understand. And it's real simple. Every 5 PSI beyond the manufacturer's recommendation, you lose 7%. And that's something you can bring to your customer. Get one of the gauges that Michael was showing you earlier. If you don't have one of those in your truck, shame on you, because you're leaving money every day. You leave without it. Okay? You can make more money if you have one of those. Then we also have matched precip nozzles. And in that 5,000 rotor, one thing that's kind of cool is we have these other nozzles that are now available for free. But I know Ewan carries them, and so does Normac here in town. But what they are is 25, 30, and 35-foot nozzles. And they're sweet. So there's quarter, third, half, and full. And so they go 25, 30, or 35 feet. So usually you get the big old nozzle tree, and it's got like 1 through 8 and all this kind of business. And it's like, oh, I like the 3s, they look good. Well, that's not right, okay? Because in the middle you need 4 times as much water as you do on the quarter, right? To get matched precip. So with these nozzles, they take care of all that for you, and you just have to space them 25, 30, or 35 feet. And that just takes all the brain power out of it. Then we get into drip line, and this is where I've been kind of hibernating for the past 2.5 years, is just selling drip. Because this is the fastest growing business that Rainbird has right now. Because so many people are going to this with the whole 88s and 81, model water efficiency landscape ordinance. I mean, you'll see drip on almost every new construction project. And we offer inline emitter tubing, or what we call drip line. And we offer a product called XF series, which is zero flex. So basically you take it out of the circular roll, and it lays right down on the ground. So the installation is a lot quicker. Plus we've invested in the emitters themselves. They're flat emitters, so they basically are better than some of the other ones you find on the market. And there's like an example of how flexible it is. And this guy's name's Dave, great guy, but I just wanted to introduce you all to him. He's demonstrating how quickly the product just lays out. And when you put the drip out, it's a huge time crunch, and that makes it super easy. And then here's the emitter. One product that we offer is called XFS, and that's a subsurface product, and it has this little copper chip in here. So roots are acidic in nature, so when they try to grow inside of this, there's an ionic field around that. So it's all natural. And so when the roots try to grow inside, basically they're stunted, so they don't grow inside the tube. But be clear, subsurface drip is not good for big shrubs and trees. Okay, like they will crimp it, they will cause problems. Subsurface drip is best for like turf or like ground cover. And if you want me to convince you to put subsurface drip underneath turf, I'm not here to do that today. If it's your idea, I'll give you everything you need, and a lot of people are doing it, and they're having a lot of success. But I'm not here to be the one to convince you to do it. We have sprays, rotors, we have to be rotating. I mean, the industry has options, like I was saying earlier, for every application. But if you have a strip of turf that's only 2 feet wide, how can you possibly do that without having overspray? And then subsurface becomes a real nice option. Okay? That's it.
How deep is
Any questions about anything?
and that subsurface, how deep does that apply?
Our recommendation is 4 to 6 inches. Every manufacturer has like a different approach. But typically I recommend 6 inches. Just because if somebody ever wants to do aeration, the tines won't ruin your party, okay? But really though, with subsurface drip, you won't have to aerate quite as much. Because a lot of the compaction that happens is because of your aerial spray.
Exactly.
And then it sits, and we all know for landscapers, you irrigate to saturation every time, right? And so because of that, you're getting compaction every application. With the subsurface, you're actually getting air and water coming up from the bottom, and so it breaks up the ground, so you should have to aerate much less.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mike.
Yeah.
And Dominic, where's Dominic's right here? Thank you very much. The next presenter is from Ewing, and is going to be talking about AquaSmart. Gary?
Jim Barbuto.
Jim Bardino. When I was talking with Gary many times, setting all this up, Gary, he said that if we ran over, you could always fill in and be a little shorter. Can you do it in 10 minutes?
Jim,
Yeah. After driving all this way, we
I can
don't
do it in
have
10
time.
minutes. I can do it in 10 minutes, no
We'll
problem.
still have time for the roundtable discussion.
I can do it in 10 minutes. Thanks. So I'm Jim Barbuto. I've been with Ewing for 11 years. So Gary calls me up and says, hey, I want you to come up and talk about a product. And I'm kind of uncomfortable about that. And I think at Ewing, if anybody's ever been to our seminars, we're kind of uncomfortable about selling the product. We'd rather educate you guys and then get our sales through education of you, the end user. So basically what you're going to see up here is a polymer-coated sand that was developed in Texas by a cotton farmer. He's a Harvard-educated cotton farmer that was trying to save water. So everything you see up here, I'll show you a little bit of technology, but most of it's from you guys. We got all of these pictures, all of these quotes from you guys, the end users. And I wanted to thank you guys for allowing us to come, Gary and I, and Tom wanted to thank you because this is kind of cool because we don't get to do this very often. So, and then I heard the professor talk about sand. I was getting all excited. He's like, sand, all right, water runs through sand. I'm like, sweet. And he's like, clay, and then tools in the toolbox, and all this great stuff. And I just wanted to jump up and write it. I remembered it all. I didn't have to write it down. So polymers have been around for years. I mean, Terrazorb, farmers have been using them for years. So basically what they did was this guy developed a polymer that he was able to break down to a microscopic piece and attach it to a substrate. So the issue with these polymers, which are, we can go to Home Depot and buy Miracle-Gro. Everybody can buy that, but if you guys, and I want you to come up here after, if you guys come up here after, you can put your hand on the Miracle-Gro side of this, and it's nice and cold, but it's not releasing any nutrients or water back to the plant. And by creating a small microscopic coating over that sand, they're able to allow this polymer to release, which also creates pore space. So now, any kind of water-soluble fertilizer and nutrients are held within that polymer, and actually probably will give you a little bit longer on your fertilizer. But we're seeing, in general, from our customers telling us about 37% water savings. So I'll just flip through. So here's a little bit about the polymers, just discussing a lot of information, This is a moisture release curve. On the left is basically regular, the black line is with nothing in it, and as you see 96 hours later where it releases with the polymer at different rates, 10 pounds, 20 pounds, 30 pounds per 1,000 square feet. Another chart. Basically, a lot of people come up to us and say, what if my kid, it's applied by aeration, drop spread at 40 pounds per 1,000, and watered in, raked off the leaf. Bermuda grass works really well with fescues and rye. It works just as well. It'll attach itself really quick, so it will get stuck on the leaf a little, so you need to rake it a little bit more to get it down into your aeration holes. It's an inert object, so it's nothing. It just turns into ammonia and water. So there's no fear of any issues. This is a test with the Pennington coated seed product, Scott's, and AquaSmart, they all coated seed. And what we found when we weighed the roots, the one on the left, you can obviously see there's a little more root mass there. These guys are crazy. They went to a Mojave Desert, and they were like, hey, let's see if we can grow some grass down here. So like, sweet. So they did 40 pounds per 1,000, and you can't really see it, but that's a lot of roots right there. That is a lot of roots. So they ripped that up, and they had 300% more root mass in the Mojave Desert. So it's pretty crazy. And you guys look at this and go, oh, by the way, I did a raffle, I put everybody's name in a raffle for a free bag. So Professor, you got a free bag when you walk out of here, so that you can do all your testing. Because I would like you to test some of this stuff for us also. Just in general, these are just customers that have done different jobs on the hillside. Slopes are a big issue up here, obviously, so it's going to hold water on the slope side a lot longer, reduce the runoff. This is a field down in Southern California at 40 pounds per 1,000. Most of this takes place around 8 to 14 days. So you'll see a result about 8 to 14 days after putting it down. I put it in my front yard, nothing in my backyard. I haven't watered in 4 months, and it's green, and I mowed twice in the last 3 weeks. And I'm waiting for the water cops in Sacramento to come by and knock on my door and go, why are you watering so late at night? But we're down to 1 day a week, so you can only water Saturday or Sunday. So, this is going to give you an opportunity if they do come down and say, hey, you can only water from 10 to 2, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Knowing that you have some moisture already in there, you're already charged up, it's going to minimize the amount of water that you need to put back into the soil. And know that you guys, this is the 5th one I've been to. So I was with 40 superintendents, golf course superintendents from around Northern California last week, and they're really nervous about, they're putting out 300,000 gallons a night. So they're pretty nervous about it. So know that they're thinking about it too, because us, the homeowners, like to drive by golf courses and say, look at all that irrigation going all over. So this is a pretty good example down in Austin. Austin's been on 1 day a week for 3 years, maybe. So they needed to find something to do. They needed some help. So this is basically, you got this HOA, and there's always one guy in the HOA that's the smart guy, and he wants to do all the studying. So basically, there's 10 handwritten pages of literature this guy put together and this is his yard on the right, and that's his neighbor's yard on the left. And he put it all together, and basically he came up with it. He saved 31% water and 37% financially on their water bill. And they have a tiered system down there, so as you go up, it gets more expensive. Vegas, this is a high school in Vegas. As you can just read that, they cut their water back because they weren't allowed to use it, pretty much any water. And this baseball coach wanted to have green grass for the high school season. So you're recommended 30 minutes a day. They were wasting water in 2 minutes a day, and they got that seed to pop. So, and this is University of Pacific. This is behind shortstop. This is kind of where all this started. We used to use this in dirt. The Oakland A's use it in dirt because moisture and clay is so, they try to keep that clay moist for playability. So it started in baseball, and then we had a little bit left over and decided to put it behind shortstop and turn it green 7 days later, and we went, might have something here. This is Papa Goat Field. So Chad's been using this product for 3 years. And he normally does 5 sessions a day at 9 minutes when he oversees down in Arizona. He cut that back to 3 minutes, 5 sessions. So for 3 minutes, almost cut it, more than half. So 66% water savings. So I mean, down in Arizona, to get seed to pop with a 66% water savings is pretty crazy. And he basically just mixes it in with the sand and then casts it out with the Dakota. This is Grizzly Ranch, Portola. Everybody kind of knows what Portola is. This is, normally he'd have to go out there and hand water that sod that he put up in there. That's just nighttime watering of brand new sod on the right. And on the left is basically what it normally looks like. So you can obviously see that the product's holding some moisture in there and he's getting some good root growth. And what this product does by holding the nutrients near the root and the moisture near the root is it creates those, when they pull the roots out, we've seen that the roots are much denser and the polymer is actually attached to the roots, so the nutrients need to be closer to the roots and they're more susceptible of not getting damaged in the summertime because the roots are such a healthier root and lower root. This is superintendent up in Washington. I did this T-box and that's 14 days later. Basically what you want to make sure is, so for a 40-pound bag, 1,000 square feet, is an extra 60 gallons of water you're going to hold in that 1,000 square feet. So we want to make sure that you double your run times that first initial. And we've been cutting back to about 65% right after that. And this is just some cost saving stuff that they did down in Austin. And then just, master gardeners. Everybody knows what a master gardener is. He said, hey, you try this. So that just shows you that obviously the one on the right has the AquaSmart in it, and it just holds the nutrients better. So that plant is utilizing the nutrients much better than the one on the left of it. Currently, people always ask me who's using. UC Davis is using it, which is great. UC Davis is going to use it in their quad areas. They're on wells. So most people come up to me and say, well, I'm on a well. Well, we talked about electricity. You're going to save some water on electricity. But they want to kind of jump forward a little bit and try to get ahead of the game so that when people come knocking on their door saying, hey, what are you doing to save water? And so that's kind of the way they're going. This is just a tomato plant, just showing you same amount of water poured in each plant and what's happening to the plant, releasing all that water. And that's it. That's it. 10 minutes? Good.
You did a great job. Jim, Mike, Dominic, and Don, we thank you for coming and doing this. You don't need to thank us. It's our pleasure to have you here, and I'd like to thank Tammy from Dormac for arranging the Raybird people, and Gary from Ewing. See, I pronounced that right, Gary. And we appreciate you helping arrange all of this. It's really great, Tammy and Gary, that's what you want. We're going to take a quick break of about 10-15 minutes, then we'll come back to our attendees roundtable discussion.
Thank you.
Our roundtable discussion turned out better than all, but it was a standing discussion, and they got stretched, and it looked like you people were having a great time asking questions. And a lot of workshops that I've gone to, you get as much from that part of it as you do from the whole different show. A couple of questions before I forget. Like I mentioned earlier, Lauren's video is going to be edited, and I'm not sure where, I mean when, but it'll be available through the office here. It may take a day or two, don't worry about that, it'll take longer than that. And then, we'd like for you, even though we're not finished, we got 2 more parts of our program, but realizing it's going to be time to go here before long, we'd like to ask you, if you will, please, to fill out the questionnaire. Does everybody get the questionnaire? That's how we can plan our next sessions a little more realistic. And if you do that, then turn it in at the end of the session before we leave. And down here, how did we do with this drop? If you would like, put a face in there, either a happy face, or a sad face, or whatever it happens to be, or maybe a kind of staring face. And that's kind of the way that they do that. So if you'll go ahead and fill that out, although we don't have to take your mind from the other people. Now,
Let me jump in there.
okay.
When we wrap up, we have a certificate of completion in here on the table. So you pick that up and leave your questionnaires in there. While we're working on a program so that if we can continue to have sessions like this, there's things that you're going to be able to show your customers that you're working with your local water purveyor and trying to get the best use of their water. So when you finish up, you got a certificate in there and leave your questionnaires in there.
For those of you that are irrigation water auditors, that certificate can be used for CEUs. And this is going to fall probably, I'm thinking, in tier 1 because it is straight up irrigation.
To restate, we are planning these type of sessions. If you read in the big print on the paper, ER, wherever, drought's over with. We're still going to have these type of training sessions.
Don't believe it, right?
For the wise, you don't believe it, no. But I mean, I'm just saying that. The lake's spilling, everything's peachy keen. We're still going to be putting on these type of workshops.
Every year.
For the wise use of water. Because when our lake is, and I'm getting this from George, we've been watching it once in a while, when our lake is spilling, if it decides not to run it, rain anymore like it's basically done now, we're only 2 years away from being out of water. At the most, let's, But anyway, enough on that. Our next 2 presenters are going to introduce Dan. You're up here. What you're going to see here now, if you don't know where you've been, it's hard to tell where you're going. Now that's what's so interesting about this presentation to me, that Dan's going to be doing. We have 2 of the real top producers in our area as far as gardens and orchards go. Jim Dole back here, he has a little different organization. The last major apple producer is Ridge. And then the presenter you're going to have is Dan Alves. Dan and I he's 3 months older than I am. I've been doing things with Dan since 1943, the 4th grade. And he has watched, and I've watched, the irrigation history change. And he's going to bring a bunch of that out so we'll know where we've been. And in fact, I was talking to George about something, he said, well, maybe so. And I can remember this first slide kind of tells it all. Here, and then, Dan, it's all yours.
Okay.
I know you can see those ditches along the trees. That's what we irrigated back in, this picture was taken in somewhere between 53 and 55. We had 2 20 meters on that place, and we irrigated about an hour, one ditch to the next ditch, and so on and so forth. When the water got down far enough, we figured that it was, not enough water, but it took a lot more water then than all the water now. The trees on this hill, the steeper we irrigated road had been over back of the horse. The other side, the ground was flatter and the water slipped in better, the trees got a lot bigger. we went from, that open ditch, they had what they call stair lines. They were 1-inch pipes, and they had emitters every 34 inches. And they shoot the water straight out in the air for a while, when it's done, they put it back there, turn it over sideways, really the other road, then back the other way. Stair lines you put together, aluminum flanges and 3/8 bolts, and you had to unscrew them, put them together, and kill them, and that didn't work too good. Then, later on, we come to these pipes here, they're movable pipes, they just slip together with a gasket. We used,
I'll show you something, tell me what you want.
we used these kind of sprinklers. They were Thompson sprinklers, but they put out a lot of water. We watered for 3 hours or so, 4 hours, 5 hours, and then we moved the lines, the boots on. And that used too much water. Back in about 87, we started watering what was left of the orchard with this kind of pipe. And our water bill for 2 months went up $600. So we figured we had to do something about it, so we went to these other type sprinklers. But these on here are these little irrigation sprinklers that have a 12-foot radius or a 24-foot circle. I run these 8 hours. In the garden here on the squash, the vine roots root down, the run root down, so by running full water from road to road, roots get nourishment outside, it's just the main plant. And usually I water those at night, and turn them off at 10, turn them off at 6 in the morning. Got four rows of those 8 foot long, and they're on squash, cucumbers, and different things, and then before these come back to water again. These other sprinkler lines, the little lines with the emitters on, that was 4 or 5 years ago, it was a cool spell, and we had oranges on the trees, and we used water to warm the oranges up. That was the ice that formed on the ground. They tell me that the water that way will raise the temperature about 5 degrees. So if you get down to 21, 22 degrees and you got water on it, it puts it back up warm enough so the trees don't freeze. By the way, that time, EIA come along and that particularly from well water, but they didn't know how to come turn their meter off, so they figured I had a leak. This one was going corn. I had that other type, had this type sprinkler with long standpipes on. And I sprinkled that every corn. But it made the corn fall over and it was wasted water going in the air. So I took the PVC 3/4 inch and put these little emitters on. This picture, I turned up the pressure just to get a picture, but usually I run about 25 pounds of pressure. This probably was closer to 50 pounds of pressure here. But I wanted to show a customer of mine what they would do, so I turned the pressure up. But by pulling those through the row of corn, water for an hour and a half, 2 hours, shut it off, pull it out, and go over and pull it through another 2 rows, I'd water the whole patch a lot quicker than these other sprinklers took 8 hours to water. Some of the corn to fall over. This water and save water. This was those plastic lines and got cantaloupes there, and that water's just around 6 foot right around the plants. Saving water. I don't think I know what that is. That's a pawpaw. Not too many of them around, but we got 2 trees out of them. And, just throw it in for
I think that's all you gave me.
what's the matter?
I think that's all you gave me.
No, there's no picture.
That's the last one.
There was that.
That's the last one. I must have missed one.
You missed 2 then.
Missed 2.
There's 2
Sorry about
There's 2 lines that showed the lines on
In the orchard?
Yeah, it was these,
Sorry about that.
it was these type sprinklers on these lines down through the orchard on each side of the trees. And then the two pictures are missing, and the ones that showed that out in the orchard. But, that's about all, unless you want to get into third act history, don't have it. Or saving water, this is about all that I got.
Dan, how much water have you reduced since you started using your newest system?
Pardon?
How much water usage have you reduced using your newest system?
Quite a lot, because these type sprinklers, when I come from the well, we're probably using around 7 gallons a minute maybe. And it cut way, way down over what it was before. I don't have a water meter to hook on hoses and tell how much it goes through a certain length of time, so I'll guess. I've turned the hose on from the well and filled the bucket, watched the pressure gauge on the well and filled the bucket. It takes so long to fill the bucket, so I figure 7 gallons a minute.
Exactly.
So it might be less through these emitters, it might be more.
Good. Anybody have a question or?
Yeah, any questions? Yeah. Well, I can remember myself, right up here where the post office is at, was the berry orchard. Yeah, I don't know if you ever remember the berry orchard here. I remember, I never called him anything but Mr. Berry, and I've since had some of his great grandkids and grandkids in 4-H. But I remember when Mr. Berry used to order, that's beautiful soil up there. We irrigate with rows down along the trees. We pull them in with a ridge buster or whatever, frozen machine, whatever you call the thing. And he got wise, always taking down the road, instead of having 2 rows like Dan showed on his wall, he put 3 or 4. Because as we all know, a plant will not grow, as far as the roots are concerned, where the water's not out. You're talking about moisture content, the root zone, and all that stuff. Well, all of a sudden, his trees started getting larger where everybody, I don't remember what your folks irrigated with. I think they always use sprinklers of all some type, like this old one here.
No, we use sprinklers.
Well, this is an old rainbird.
We use a different.
Well, a little, you use the 20s or the 30s.
Yeah.
And this is a great big old irrigator thing. I still, see, some of you people are smiling, but if you've ever in your life packed irrigation pipe down here in the valley, they're still doing it. And you get it all strung out and washed out, and you've got the pump turned on or whatever you got, and they're all flapping like that. That's money in the bank and music to my ears. Old school, That's all that thing. See where we've been? And with what I saw earlier this afternoon, we're going a long ways. The technology is wonderful, isn't it? Dan, thank you very much for coming. Dan kept telling me, he said, you know, Doug,
You got them, so I did not think you got them.
I'm not a public speaker. Well, he dispelled that here, didn't he? Thanks, Dan. Okay, our next presenter, I've not had the opportunity to listen to him. I'm looking forward to it because we're going to be using David again, I know, many times. His name is David Waller, and he's from the Spring Feeder Nursery over in Yankee Hill. I used to spend a lot of time at Yankee Hill. And he asked me, just kind of like some of the other vendors did, what we want to talk about. He's going to talk about water-free. David, you're still going on my garden, right?
Yeah,
He's considered one of the leading experts in the state on xeriscape.
I'd like to meet the people that consider me that.
Right there, meet that guy.
Guilty.
And he said it was based on good stuff. David, looking forward to it.
Thanks. This is going to be my PowerPoint today. My name's David Walter. I've been in horticulture for about 42 years. Nursery work, did 20 years in landscape maintenance, and now in my semi-retirement, I'm back to nursery work. So, I learned a lot of neat things today. Hope y'all did too. I get to be your anchor man, and hopefully I won't keep you too long. Depends on how fast we can get through this. It's not that complicated. There's no sales pitches, no new products, just some good old-fashioned ideas, observations, and such. I want to start off by showing, I'm sorry, you guys. So we're all saving water here. These guys all talk about how to put it down on the ground. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about keeping it down on the ground. Just a personal opinion, I really think we'll be sitting here in 40 years there won't be any such thing as an above ground sprinkler. I think putting water in the air is a foolish thing. I think that underground laser and such will be the next thing in irrigation because so much water is lost to the air. Who back here mentioned the moon? I need a volunteer. You had to really promise not to get
I've already been up there.
You're used to it. Make me get Jane. I'll get Jane.
Jane would be, actually, we haven't seen Jane yet today.
Come on, Jane. All I need you to do is hold this like you're at a bullfighting, okay? Demonstrating Bernoulli's effect. If you think of this as a solo pour, this as your water bank, and this as the north freaking wind, which we all hate, you get water pulled out of the ground. If I can do this. Tried this last night, Kath and I. Took 10 minutes.
I hope we're getting this on.
This is going to work. Worked in the kitchen sink. Okay, I'll give a free plant to anybody that can make this work. Because it works. I did it last night. We did it. You want to try? Spray grenade. It's the air pressure difference. It pulls the water out of the ground.
There's not enough water in the cup.
Oh, I drank some of it.
Has
Has anybody not seen that before? 7th grade science? Somebody? Nobody's seen it? You haven't seen it? Okay. I'm sweating like crazy over here. Google Bernoulli's principle, and it'll show you that on YouTube, and then in your own privacy of your own kitchen sink, you can do it. I really thought I'd be less nervous up here and I'd be able to pull it off really quick. Anyway, to mitigate moisture loss from wind, solar, heat, best way to do it, in my opinion, is mulch. Mulch is, from a price standpoint, mulch versus pre-emergent. If you got bare soil in your landscape, I'm speaking mostly to landscape maintenance people. You're putting down product, weed killer, pre-emergent, you're already throwing money on the ground. Those are only good for 6 months or so. You get your escaped weeds that escape the pre-emergent, and then they colonize because they don't have the competition from the other weeds. But if you mulch down, and when I was doing landscape maintenance, people think mulch and compost are synonymous, and they're not. Mulch can be any old thing. During my landscape maintenance days, I brought all my grass clippings home and built my beautiful garden beds with just plain old lawn clippings. You throw it on the ground, it blocks the sunlight, which blocks the weeds from germinating. If ones do escape, you can pull them right out like with tweezers because there's no ground holding onto them. But it does mitigate the wind, the sunlight. It's like putting a kettle on a steaming pot of water. It holds the water in the soil. Okay. Another one of my pet peeves is sprayers in a shrub bed. You see this all the time. That and drip hose sticking up everywhere. What an ugly, stupid thing. Drip hoses, and I didn't even know this until Greenberg gave me his new products catalog. My method has always been to, in shrubs and shrub beds, run drip emitters, run them under the ground, knock a 3/4 inch piece of PVC in the ground, under the plant, put the dripper down the PVC. You're keeping the water subsurface, keeping it away from the evaporation. Easy to check, you just pull the little thing out, check for moisture, put it back in. It's more out of sight, so people aren't messing with the drippers, tripping over them. But I see in the Rainbird product guide, they actually make a little basket that does that. You plug it into your drip feed and it pokes right in the ground, sits flush with the ground, and there's no drip to be seen. Just great test repairs, because when I was doing landscape maintenance, most of my water loss was human caused. Anywhere down like Chico State, you ran a sprinkler anytime before 3 o'clock in the morning, you were gonna have geysers when you came back, because college students kick off sprinklers at night when they're coming home drunk. It's just a fact of life. So you can keep it out of their visual, keep the temptation away. There's a lot less breakage. Pop-up sprinklers are great for that. Hiding the drip is great from that. As far as lawns go, the grass itself forms the mulch over the soil that keeps the wind off the soil. The higher your grass, the less weeds, the less moisture loss. I know a lot of maintenance guys, lawn starts getting yellow, first thing I do is go dial up the water. When it's usually a nitrogen problem. You're low on nitrogen. You can't fix a yellow lawn with more water. And so many people try to do that. Bring the nitrogen up, the grass grows thicker, less water loss, less weeds. I do at my place, and I have been gardening for a lot of years, and my last project going in the last 5 years is a zero water, no irrigation landscape in the back. And I've been researching a lot of Australian, South American desert type plants besides your yuccas and agaves and cactus and things. And there are quite a few on the back of the list, or the back of the handout. There's just a really small, because I didn't want to spend my whole day making a Western garden book of dry plants for you. But there is a horticultural list there of trees and shrubs that you can grow without water. My technique, and I live on a hill as well, and most of this is on somewhat of a slope. But the technique, you dig your hole, you plant your plant in the ground, sloping up. Next to the plant, you dig another hole and you put your container that the plant came in there. Once a week, you fill this container with water with a hose by hand. Imagine. This water will percolate out those 4 drain holes, run downhill and run down. This plant will find this water. Once again, you've kept the water off the surface. It's really one of my big deals to keep the water below surface. You can actually fill this pot with mulch, grass clippings, dry straw, whatever, and even help more. So the first year, put water in these cans about once a week. It's about 1 gallon to 2 gallons a week. The next year, then it goes through another winter cycle. It roots in some more. The next year, I put water in those cans once a month. Fill them up once a month. Third year, the cans are pretty beat up from weed eating. They don't show much anymore because the plant has grown. Let's do this with this. The plant has grown over the pot by now. Pots becomes insignificant and invisible. Doesn't break down the soil, but you never see it again. I noticed in the Rainbird catalog, again, I sound like I'm a Rainbird salesman, but they've got these things. Instead of using the can, if that's too garage door for you, got these nice little baskets that do the same thing for a sprinkler system. But my goal here was to create a garden that doesn't get any water at all. And it's turned out really nice. I haven't lost anything. The most important part of planting a xeriscape is zero. How many of you guys learned this xeriscape back in the day? And now they're saying zeroscape? I can't make myself say that. It's xeriscape. Anyway, garden with 0 water at all. Where was I? Successfully done that. Banksias, a lot of Australian stuff. And Proteas, Banksias, I like some yuccas, but the cedars. It's an amazing amount of shrubs that you can grow. Oh, I know, I was gonna say planting time. Really, people want their gardens put in April, May, June. It would be up to you to collect the plant material, tell your customer to wait, maintain the plant material for them or let them maintain the plant material, and put it in November, December, January, as late as February. Give the plant a chance to get out of that root ball and into the ground just somewhat before the summer rolls along and starts cooking. I wrap through my material really, really fast. I do that when I'm nervous. I talk fast. And yeah.
I just have a comment, so like, I know Hunter has similar products for root watering, you know, and
Can you
establishing.
hand me a brochure?
Yay. Sorry, guys. But really though, those products are for establishment, you know, first 2 years, 5 years, whatever. After that, you know, there needs to be potentially another source or nothing.
Or nothing. Which would be really nice if we could start doing landscapes that didn't require water. I mean, we've all been to Reno, seen their city boulevard strips. They're beautiful landscapes, no water. And I think that's really, we need to be doing more of that, planting less Raphilevis and Wheeler's Dwarf and things like that in our parking lots. Well, it's a cookie cutter landscape, it's easy. Okay, no water. Lawns, we took care of that. Mulch, everybody's sure on mulch, and everybody tell me nobody has a bed of just plain dirt in their landscape. You can't?
Where I'm part of the plantation with retirement community, we some years ago decided that it's just too much trouble to put that stuff down every year. Let it bear, and we're now in the process of putting down the mulch again.
You know, one of the nice things about the mulch is that my yard have been mulching damn near an acre of land for 10 years. I put down about 7-8 yards once a year by hand, like this. But when you've got the weeds up already, even if they have seeds on the weeds, if you take the weeds and lay them down flat and put 6 inches right on top of them, 90% of them won't come back. And you don't have to worry about the seeds on the weeds because the seed in the soil bank underneath the ground it's not going to be hurt by another dozen seeds that you put down. So, mulching good. Mulching good.
David, you sell mulch out at the nursery?
I use it. I use whatever I can. I used to get manure from Langworth where they methane their manure, and I get that half strength manure and use that. You go to the earthworm soil factory. They tumble that stuff and they'll sell you the tumblings, which the discard for $25 a yard. That's a good source. Guys like you that have big fields full of grass, I get my tractor out there and make some mulch and chop it up.
You do his business, Jim.
You're not so much with the bark.
You know,
I mean, I can walk on bark.
if you're gonna do bark, in my personal opinion, get shredded bark. The shreds. It locks, the fibers lock together, it won't run down a hill, people can walk on it and it's not gonna end up in the parking lot, won't float. Probably somewhat more fire retardant too, because the less oxygen in between the particles, the less flame.
Actually, shredded is more flammable. In Sacramento, there's certain areas you can't even put shredded down because if someone throws a cigarette.
Compared to chunk.
Yes.
I would like a really interesting experiment if we took a bed of chunk and took a bed of shreds and physically lit it on fire, what kind of fire we would get in comparison. And I'd be willing to bet the shred would burn like a cigarette or an incense, and the chunk would flame up without being hot. Both are going to be flammable.
Right. No, I hear you. I didn't make the rule. I just.
How about rock safe,
Excellent. It's excellent.
no problem with fire.
One of my really fun landscape tricks is to put a giant boulder in a landscape, run a dripper under the boulder, and put plants around the outside of the boulder. That rock becomes a water reservoir for the perennials that are sitting alongside. It's kind of just imitating what nature does. You know, you all roll over logs and stuff, and you find, if you don't find moisture, you find creatures that do like moisture hiding down there. I use pine needles and oak leaves and the drum leaves from my forest. When the north winds are blowing, I mentioned the north winds, that's the start of our drought season. Does anybody here have, what is our total evaporation rate for the year? I won't, every time I see a rain come through and it gives us 1.5 inches, and the north wind sucks away 3 inches, I say, how does it bank any water?
I don't know.
But anyway, the mulch down in your woods, those of you that live down in paradise, about the time the north wind starts blowing, you can pick up a pine needle and snap it in half. It doesn't bend, it just completely snaps in half. You put a string trimmer down in there, and it just turns it into a little teeny, the most beautiful mulch you ever saw. You know, you shouldn't take the mulch off of the pine forest because it slows down the water, helps it percolate down more, and you get less runoff. It's healthier for the forest too. It's the way it should have been. Just rather than breaking it up and taking it to the down for the burn pile. So when people here live in paradise, you can get a mower and mow it up. And before fire season, bag it and use that as a mulch. Or you can do like I do, wait till it's real dry, hit it with a string trimmer, and then rake it up and use it as a mulch. No more questions for me? We'll be out of here. Thank you.
David Ward was right, as he is quite frequently on your knowledge and ability to put it across. We'd really like to thank all our presenters. Here's what we were hoping, and I should wait till you get your evaluation straight ahead. What we were hoping is that when you leave here today, you'll say, God, this was worth my time. You know, I learned some stuff new, I refortified stuff I already know, and that's what we were after. This was really worth my afternoon. And hopefully that's what happens on here. I'd like to thank a couple of people. There's a whole staff here, George and his staff and others to thank, but two, I'd like to pick out one in particular, Georgiana, who's in there working on there, and then Jim P. back here, I pronounce his last name. Passanisi, I'm working on that. Jim is the water treatment supervisor here, and has forgotten more about water treatment than most people will ever know or need to know. And he's also our clerk and did a lot of different work, even on the weekends, helping put this together. Jim, we really appreciate that for your effort. Thank you for that. There's also another member large of our conservation committee. Figure, just set up. Figure.
That's you,
Yeah, Belinda set up. She was late, having to get here. And again, we'd like to thank Lauren. I've already done that before. And anybody else, all the visitors. I really feel good about the afternoon myself. Steph, would you like to say anything?
Just like to thank everybody for coming out. We're planning on holding another one of these for the residential users next. And hopefully we gave you some good information that will help both you and us out in the future. So thanks for coming out.
And thanks again to Dad for sharing a lifetime of knowledge with us, and now we know where we've been. It's wonderful, and I know we're going to be calling on both of you in the past. One of the things that we've got up here, one of the things that Conservation Committee is doing is landscape. There's still a lot of garden, vegetable gardens, and of course Dad's got one of the leading ones in the Paradise Irrigation District. And we've got a little plot there that really blends into the type of garden plots that most Paradise residents have. It's right up there. And we worked at this fall, planted a cover crop of what's called a plow down on it. And it's coming back. We lost some of it because of the drought and it didn't rain for so we're gonna be making a decision here in April most likely. If there's any water restrictions, we won't do that. We'll just follow it like a lot of the ag grounds are going to be. But we're certainly using some of the both years. Well, that's what you see up here. But if there's any water restrictions, it's our recommendation, we don't do anything with it. We'll just follow it and keep the weeds down and maybe do some mulching on it. Anybody else have any, yes?
You know, I would actually like to see you keep that garden going and have ways that homeowners could use the existing water that they already have and have that as a workshop where they would see what they could do and not have to give up gardening because we have a drought. But
We're not,
learn to evaluate what they have and use what they have. And
I keep trying to interrupt you, but this is daffodil, I think it's really, there over here. How many daffodils did you plant when you were almost with you in the garden club?
before the war took over, I think it was 135,000.
135,000, and the ridge is covered with daffodils
170.
on here.
Yeah, we're quite up there now. I don't know. We don't know what we have, 300,000, 500,000 in town, because they multiply like crazy.
Well, we're
Jane
gonna,
is the one that started that after the 2008 fires to help beautify our community. Thank you, Jane.
we, whatever we wind up doing, we're gonna have a separate meter, and then we can monitor it with some of the different state-of-the-art, plus some of Dan's different devices, because he's involved in that part of it, as David now.
And I hear what you're saying, and maybe we'll blend that into when we have one for residents.
Right,
And show them how.
and using
Yeah.
permaculture.
That's a good point.
Permaculture is one of the best ways to vegetable garden. You can, and there's a woman who's dead now, and she did something called her name was Ruth Stout, and she gardened with lots of layers of mulch, usually straw, and she hardly watered her garden all summer. She only used minimal watering. And there's just so many alternatives that people could learn about through workshops, you know, hands-on kind of thing, and things that they can go and observe. And I would like to see something like that.
Well, that's good. That's exactly what we have in mind. And one of the things I mentioned, and since this is not a workshop on gray water usage, but Stan here has got some information, he's quite deeply into this, and it's on the back table there, so if you're interested in it, there's going to definitely be a push, because in some areas, this is what they use a lot of. And so Stan, you're part of suspect here, right?
Yeah.
And we'll be looking at all the options as we go future on here. Any other questions before we call it a day? And we're early. We're on time. Thank you for coming.
Put on there any ideas of things you'd like to see in the future.
That's right.
Certificates in the room.